and let us all do we can to build a better future.
So on CNN, Dr. Cornel West had a back and forth with Anderson Cooper. So Anderson Cooper was upset of Dr. Cornel West's stance on the war in Ukraine, NATO, and again, it's been a while since we actually had like a large anti-war voice on CNN, because you know CNN would never have Tulsi Gabbard or Jimmy Dore or Aaron Mate or Max Blumenthal or Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi on those platforms. They wouldn't. So I want to pull up this tweet here first here real quick, so that way all of you know what's going on. First, shout out to Sabby Sabs. They don't like to give a platform to those voices, and this is a retweet from John Braka. Before Anderson Cooper's discussion, interrogation of Dr. Cornel West's stance on NATO and Biden's war in Ukraine, can anyone remember another anti-war voice being given a space in the capitalist media at that level? But hey, in this Orwellian context, we shouldn't be surprised. So I pull up this little conversation that, well, they had. So let's play it.
Candidate Cornel West, who joins us now. Dr. West, appreciate you being with us. It's good to see you.
It's always a blessing to see you, and I salute your two precious gifts from heaven.
Thank
Brother
you.
Sebastian, Brother Wyatt. Yes, indeed.
They're doing well. Thank you. I want to ask you, Senator Manchin up in New Hampshire tonight, he seems to be testing the waters there. He says the parties are too far to the left and to the right. What do you think of his politics?
Well, I just read the pamphlet Common Sense, and my God, they had the audacity to rename that after the great Thomas Paine's revolutionary pamphlet of January 10th, 1976, that was critical of all forms of hierarchy in the name of the dignity of those Sly Stone called everyday people. I don't think that the No Labels Party, with their hundreds of $million flowing already, are fundamentally focused on what I'm concerned about, which is the plight of poor and working people trying to come to terms with the cop cities. Why do the critiques of the cop cities trying to come to terms with striking workers, be they in Hollywood, be they in Amazon, be they at UPS, coming to terms with the eco side, with the fossil fuel companies, steel, corporate greed running out of control. We're at a moment now, my brother, where if we don't come to terms with this massive callousness and indifference to the plight of poor and working people, we're going to lose everything. Planet, democracy, qualitative relations with each other. That's how life and death, like our situation is, my brother. Very much so.
You know the concern, certainly. I mean, you've been asked this question a million times from a lot of Democrats and Republicans against Trump that a third-party candidate like yourself could siphon votes away from President.
Now, of course, I let that video play as long as it did because I wanted to get to that question right here. Again, how third-party voters are going to siphon away support from Biden. Look, again, I am not going to support Biden. Okay, I am not honor bound to support the Democratic Party. I could give a damn about the Democratic Party. And anyone that's a third-party voter needs to have that same kind of mindset. You don't owe the DNC your vote. These are the same fear tactics that we saw in 2016 and in 2020. You don't have to fall in line. You don't have to support these jagoff politicians. You don't have to do it. You have no written contract with the Democratic Party. Break away from the two-party system.
President Biden, David Axelrod, recently tweeted saying in 2016, the Green Party played an outside role in the tipping the election to Donald Trump. Now with Cornel West as their likely nominee, they could easily do it again. Risky business. Now, I know you said you don't believe Jill Stein made that big a difference in the vote count in 2016. In Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, her votes did exceed Trump's margin over Clinton. So how do you answer that critique that you will be siphoning votes away and potentially leading to a Trump victory?
Well, part of it is that nearly 40% of our precious citizens every 2 and 4 years decide not to vote at all. And we know that the so-called spoilers, which is a category you can imagine I don't accept at all, over 2/3 of those who vote, it could be a Gary Johnson, a Sister Jill Stein.
Now, again, they're bringing up Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Again, you know what? I'm glad all those people voted for Dr. Jill Stein. I'm happy that they did that. And I encourage people to come out and support. Dare I say it, I'll even go a step further. I hope that Dr. Cornel West, if he gets the Green Party nomination, and I also hope that the Libertarian Party as well, win at least one electoral college state. I know that's setting a bar very high, because there's a lot of things that prevent third parties from being on the ballot, from being on the debate stage, and so much more. But I want this scenario to happen because I just want the vote blue, no matter who, liberals, to finally realize that people don't owe them a goddamn thing. I am not going to respect the vote blue, no matter who, sycophants. I'm not going to respect these liberals who tell me I got to support for Biden. No, no. And in fact, I hope I live rent-free in your head. Yes, on election night, I'm actually going to take a selfie and say, hey, I voted third party. I will do that. Dare I say it, I'll even go a step further. If we get to 100K subscribers on this channel, I will wear a kilt and say, hey, I voted third party, and take a selfie just to live rent-free in the liberals' heads, because I like being the bad guy.
Stein, Brother Ralph Nader, whoever, people say they would never vote for the two parties. And I can understand those two parties become too corrupt. Their politicians are too conformist. Too many of the politicians themselves are just cowardly, will just say anything. What about truth? What about justice? Truth and justice bigger than all of us, bigger than every party, every race, every person. If you're concerned about truth and justice, then you can't be cowardly, complacent, or conformist, and especially if you look at the world through the lens of those who are incarcerated, those who are in ghettos and hoods and barrios. Brother David Axelrod, he looks at the world through the lens of the establishment. Well, of course, from the lens of the establishment, he's concerned about reproducing the establishment. My God, my God. There's no doubt about that. In the 1850s, both parties supported slavery.
But I think he's probably
with
more
the Labor Party.
I think he seems more, though. I mean, you know, David Axelrod, he seems more interested in preventing former President Trump from getting reelected.
Again, look. Again, you have Anderson Cooper from CNN. Come on, Dr. Cornel West, fall in line. Fall in line. Renounce your campaign and support Biden. That's what they want him to do. That's what the establishment wants Dr. Cornel West to do. Drop the third party. Don't shake the boat. Don't cause a ruckus. I, for one, encourage Dr. West to keep on pushing forward, because you know what? You don't owe CNN or the Democratic Party a goddamn thing.
More than, I'd say, recreating the establishment.
Yes.
No?
Well, no, I'm talking about the Democratic Party establishment, though, brother.
Oh, okay.
The Axelrod, you see what I mean? You would agree with, he's very much part of the Democratic Party establishment.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, hey, Anderson. I know that you got your producer yelling in your ear, but why don't you unplug yourself for a second and realize that, you know, people don't like to be told what to do. Now, I encourage my audience to think freely and vote however you feel like. And guess what? If none of you want to vote or participate, I can't change your mind. You have every right to feel the way you do. I will only ask as a favor that if you do live in a ballot initiative state, learn what some ballot initiatives are up for a vote. Vote for the good ones, stand against the bad ones, and then you could give a middle finger to everyone in that polling station and walk out. You don't have to vote for any politician, but if you live in a citizen ballot initiative state, make that a consideration. You don't have to, but I consider it as a favor to me. So there you go.
His interest, anyway, I don't want to speak for him, but you criticize President,
absolutely.
You criticized President Biden, saying recently that he contributed, in your words, I'm quoting, contributed to a crime against humanity when he became the architect of the mass incarceration regime in the 1990s. You're referring to the 1994 Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act that then Senator Biden sponsored. You also said it's, quote, very clear that his cognitive powers are in decline. You have had a remarkable career. You've championed those whose voices have been silenced all your life. We've had you on the program a ton of times talking about that. You've never run a large bureaucracy or had any major governmental leadership role. Isn't that important to actually governing as president?
Oh, absolutely. I'd have to bring in people who are experienced, but the important thing is your vision and the lens through which you view the world. Policy is something that can be worked out in light of vision. If your vision is one of militarism abroad, then you're going to be preoccupied with wars and militaristic adventures. We've known Biden's got a long history. I don't think he's actually seen a war that he hadn't supported. I think the invasion and occupation of Iraq was a crime against humanity. How many precious hundreds of thousands of Iraqis were killed based on a
You could tell Anderson Cooper, he's twitching his eye. The producer's yelling in his ear.
lie. Well, Biden was running interference in that regard. I think mass incarceration in the United States in the last 40 years is a crime against humanity. I've taught in prisons for 41 years. I've stayed in contact with the rich humanity of my brothers and sisters who have been incarcerated. And many have done things they shouldn't have done. And many are there because they're innocent. But the important thing is.
Yes, and who is responsible? That architect for the crime bill? Joe Biden. Joe Biden did that. Vote blue no matter who. The reason why there's a prison industrial complex is because of Joe Biden.
They are sites of barbarity. We ought to be ashamed to live in a country when you look at the conditions of our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated. And it's not just the 1994 crime bill. You can go back to the Biden-Thernstrom. He was a Strom-Thernstrom bills of 84 and 86 and 91 and then 90.
For those who don't know who Strom Thurmond is, he was a well-known racist, Republican segregationist. He was a good friend to Joe Biden. That's right, Bernie. When you were being arrested during the Civil Rights Movement, Joe Biden was buddy-buddy with Strom Thurmond. You didn't know that, or maybe you did. That's your good friend, Bernie. Your pal, Biden, your good friend, Bernie. Yeah, Joe Biden was with that guy. Joe Biden gave a eulogy to Strom Thurmond when he passed away.
You see what I mean? So it's just a matter of trying to be truthful. I'm not trying to trash Brother Biden. I really not. I'm trying to make him accountable for his actions in light of how the wretched of the earth are treated in this nation and around the world.
I agree with Dr. Cornel West, but however, again, look, Joe Biden doesn't even know where he's at, and if he did, he still wouldn't care. He just wouldn't care.
And that's true for any politician, be it Obama, Biden, Clinton, Bush, Trump. All of them have to be measured by the same standard of truth and justice.
I want to ask you about the war in Ukraine, because I saw you tweeted out, you said NATO is an expanding instrument of U.S. global power that provoked Russia into a criminal invasion and occupation of Ukraine. You said this proxy war between the American empire and the Russian Federation could lead to World War III. We must stop the war and war crimes, including cluster bombs used by all parties, and embark on diplomatic talks that should lead to a just peace. You believe, I mean, how are you going to bring all sides to the table on Ukraine? And do you really believe that NATO provoked Russia into invading Ukraine?
The answer is yes, Cooper. Come on. Come on. What more do you want? Exactly. You wanted Dr. West to go on CNN and say, oh, yeah, you're right, Anderson Cooper. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry to have my own opinion.
Well, when Russia was promised that NATO would not move 1 inch, and then a few years later, you got 13 former Soviet related countries. But wait a minute. No,
but you're talking about in 1990, there was an agreement signed that NATO would not move into East Germany. But actually nothing was said about further east. And it was, at the very least, it was ambiguous. You can, there's an argument to be made.
It was formal and informal talks. But I mean, you know, the great George Kennan, who's probably had the finest minds of the establishment when it comes to foreign affairs. He said he doesn't understand why NATO needs to exist any longer because it's defensive. Well, the collapse of the Soviet Empire meant, in fact, you no longer even needed NATO. Europe could come up with its own security, but
it doesn't seem like that because the people
an arm of the American empire. That's
you don't believe
the challenge.
You don't believe though that the people of Ukraine right now need NATO to defend against Russian aggression?
Well, the people of Ukraine right now who are suffering, and I'm in deep solidarity with their suffering, they are being caught between this proxy war between the American empire and the Russian Federation. Federation. Now,
but that's not really true. I mean,
yeah, the people are stuck in between that war. Anderson, while you're in your nice little air-conditioned office, you big brain fool.
But Dr. West, I mean, it wasn't early on. I mean, you're far more educated than I am, but early on, it was Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary who wanted to join NATO. Warsaw Pact countries, suddenly free, did not want to be under the yoke of the former Soviet Union any longer, and they are the ones who applied to join NATO. It wasn't the U.S. pushing these countries in an expansion play. It was these countries suddenly free, the people in those countries saying, we want to be in the EU. NATO is the fastest way.
I also want to acknowledge Bad Cookies in the live stream chat. They wouldn't need NATO right now if not for NATO moving military forces near the Ukrainian border.
Kind of a stepping stone in the EU. We want that. We want to turn to the West. No, would you have denied Hungary, Czechoslovakia,
And Black Zen in the live stream chat, Dr. West, you're far more educated than I am, but allow me to tell my lies.
choice?
Well, I mean, one, I would have followed George Kennan. I would have abolished NATO right after the collapse of the Soviet Empire, and I would have tried to welcome Russia into the nation, the community of nations, rather than trying to push them against the wall. We know that their system of repression and domination is one in which they're going to feel as if their backs are against the wall. And I think you would probably agree that if Russia or China had missiles in Canada or Mexico targeting Washington, D.C., U.S. government would blow them to smithereens. That's how empires behave. You've read the history. I know the history. We're critical of imperial activity, no matter who it is, American, Russian, and what have you. But America is the most powerful empire in the world, in the history of the world, my brother. And it seems to me, if we can't dismantle that empire in order to empower poor and working people here and abroad, we're going to lose our democracy. It's almost like Rome, you know, it's Cato the Younger and Cicero against Julius Caesar.
Right, but there's
what happens when your empire begins to take over your democratic possibilities?
And again, look, we've seen the long said history of the fall of empires. History repeats itself over and over again. And unfortunately, we're at a dangerous crossroad. We have to make a decision as citizens. Is this acceptable? And again, as this war continues on in Ukraine, it can intensify. I want to play one last final video of Dr. Cornel West. This is him at a political rally. It's important to hear his words.
Years we've had too many black leaders who has become too well adjusted to injustice. Too well adapted to indifference. Running around scared and intimidated and afraid and laughing when it ain't funny and scratching when it don't get. Great Paul Lawrence Dunbar said, "What? Wearing the mask. What does it mean to put on the mask? So you never can be free. You'll never get off the plantation by wearing the mask." James Baldwin said, "Love forces us to take off the mask we know we cannot live within, but fear we cannot live without." And we got too many folk, especially in black faces and high places, that's just scared and intimidated and obsessed with their careers and the next opportunity rather than precious brothers and sisters in mass incarceration and depression, children in the hood dealing with decrepit school systems where they got more police than they have counselors and nurses. That's what it is to live in an American empire that is in internal decay as it spends trillions of wars somewhere else, that all of a sudden when it comes to jobs for the living wage and health care for everybody and quality education, can't find a penny. Got to cut back on it. That's what Martin King called war priority.
I wanted to play that video in its full entirety, so that way I didn't interrupt him. But we need more of that. Now, let's have democracy in the chat. Do you see Joe Biden doing an energetic speech like that? Type 1 for, oh yeah, Biden's got it in the bag. Type 2, like, no, that's, he couldn't even say one sentence. See, this is why I'm in full support of third parties. And I encourage everyone to vote independent. I hope that the Greens and Libertarians, and I'm going to say this again for the vote blue no matter who people, I hope that the Greens and Libertarians are successful this election year or this coming election year. And I hope that they do get more than 5% of the vote in the general election. I hope they get double digit. And I dare I say I'll even go a step further. I hope both parties, Libertarian and Green, do win at least one electoral college state. I know it's a high bar and it's impossible, but I would like to see it. because it's long overdue we change the system. Stay tuned to Hard Lens Media.